Exoterism and Esoterism, the first division. Why does the same tradition produce both awakening and obedience? Why do the same scriptures liberate some minds while imprisoning others? The answer lies in a division older than religion itself, a division that was never meant to become a fracture. This is the division between exoterism and esoterism. And in no tradition is this division more misunderstood than in Gnosis. If you're new here, this is Gnostic Codex. Subscribe, like the video, and comment where you're watching from. The ancient world did not speak of truth as a single layer. Truth was understood as stratified. What was given to the many was not the same as what was reserved for the few. Not because the few were superior, but because depth requires preparation. This is where exoterism was born. Exoterism is the outer teaching, the visible layer. The language of rules, stories, morals, and commandments. It speaks to behavior. It organizes communities. It stabilizes societies. And it does something essential. It protects the deeper truth by disguising it. Esoterism, by contrast, is not public teaching. It is inner transmission. It does not aim to regulate actions, but to transform perception. It does not tell you what to do. It reveals what you are. In Gnosis, this distinction is not theoretical. It is structural. The first error in religious history was not heresy. It was confusion of levels. When the outer teaching is mistaken for the inner truth, symbol becomes literal, myth becomes history, and authority replaces understanding. This is where Gnosis begins to diverge from institutional religion. The Gnostics recognized something unsettling. The exoteric layer can be taught to anyone. The esoteric layer can only be recognized. No amount of instruction can replace inner readiness. This is why Gnosis never spread through mass conversion. It spread through awakening. In the exoteric layer, God is external. In the esoteric layer, the divine is remembered inwardly. In the exoteric layer, salvation is future. In the esoteric layer, liberation is immediate recognition. In the exoteric layer, authority speaks. In the esoteric layer, silence reveals. This is why Jesus, in the Gnostic understanding, speaks in two voices. To the crowds, he speaks in parables. To the initiates, he speaks in mysteries. Not because truth is withheld arbitrarily, but because truth cannot be forced into an unprepared structure. The exoteric teaching protects the world from chaos. The esoteric teaching frees the individual from illusion. The problem begins when institutions freeze the outer layer and discard the inner one. When obedience replaces insight. When belief replaces knowledge. When fear replaces remembrance. At that point, exoterism no longer points inward. It becomes an end in itself. The Gnostics called this the great inversion. The shell was preserved, the core was buried, and what remained was religion without gnosis, form without essence. Why exoterism controls and esoterism awakens. Exoterism does not control because it is evil. It controls because it is structural. Its function is order. Exoteric teaching speaks to the surface of the human being: behavior, identity, belonging, fear, reward. It does not ask who you are beneath these layers. It tells you how to act within them. This is why exoterism is always compatible with institutions. Institutions require predictability. Predictability requires rules. Rules require obedience. Exoterism provides all three. In the exoteric framework, truth must be clear, repeatable, and enforceable. Symbols are flattened into literal claims. Mystery is reduced to narrative. The unknown is replaced with certainty. This creates psychological safety. And psychological safety is powerful. But there is a cost. When truth is externalized, authority must also be external. God becomes someone who commands. Salvation becomes something granted. Meaning becomes something assigned. The individual no longer discovers truth. They receive it. Esoterism moves in the opposite direction. It does not offer certainty. It introduces instability, not chaos, but productive tension. Esoteric teaching does not calm the mind. It unsettles it. It dissolves fixed identity. It exposes unconscious assumptions. It reveals contradiction within belief. This is why it cannot be institutionalized. Gnosis does not give answers. It removes false questions. It does not say, believe this. It asks, who is the one who believes? That question is disruptive. From a psychological perspective, Exoterism reinforces the ego. It tells the ego who it is, what it must do, and what will happen if it obeys. Esoterism dissolves the ego's central position. It reveals that identity itself is provisional. That realization is not comforting. It is liberating, but only after disorientation. This is why esoterism has always been accused of being dangerous, not because it promotes immorality, but because it removes dependency. A person who discovers inner authority no longer needs an external one. They cannot be governed through fear of punishment or promise of reward. The Gnostics understood this clearly. They saw that exoterism, when severed from esoterism, becomes a mechanism of control rather than a gateway to truth. Fear replaces insight. Dogma replaces understanding. Law replaces wisdom. This is also why the figure of the demiurge appears in Gnostic thought, not as a caricature of evil, but as a symbol of authority mistaken for source. The demiurgic mindset believes itself to be supreme because it cannot perceive beyond itself. It governs the exoteric world perfectly, but it does not awaken it. Esoterism does not fight exoterism. It transcends it. The outer teaching remains useful for social order. The inner teaching exists for liberation. Confusion arises only when one is mistaken for the other. This is why Gnosis was never meant for crowds. Not because crowds are inferior, but because awakening is individual. No institution can awaken on your behalf. No doctrine can substitute recognition. The esoteric path begins when the exoteric one is seen through, not rejected, understood. The rules lose absolute authority. The symbols regain depth. The stories open inward. Symbol, myth, and the survival of Gnosis. When esoterism is threatened, it does not disappear. It hides, not out of fear, but out of intelligence. The Gnostics understood something fundamental. Truth that is spoken plainly to an unprepared mind does not enlighten. It hardens into belief. So they did not encode Gnosis in doctrine. They encoded it in symbol. Symbol is not decoration. Symbol is protection. A symbol carries multiple layers simultaneously. To the exoteric mind, it is a story. To the esoteric mind, it is a map. This dual function allowed Gnosis to survive beneath dominant religious structures without being destroyed by them. Myth, in the Gnostic sense, is not fiction. It is compressed metaphysics. It speaks in images because images bypass the part of the mind that demands certainty. Myth does not argue. It invites recognition. This is why Gnostic texts appear strange, fragmented, even contradictory. They are not meant to be agreed with. They are meant to be entered. When institutional religion solidified the exoteric layer, the esoteric did not attempt to compete on the same level. It withdrew. It went underground. Not physically, but cognitively. The Gnostics knew that open confrontation with institutions would fail. Institutions defend structure. Esoterism dissolves structure. The two cannot coexist openly without conflict. So Gnosis adopted a different strategy. It became invisible to those who could not see. This is why secrecy became essential. Not secrecy as elitism, but secrecy as selective resonance. Only those already questioning the surface were capable of hearing what lay beneath it. This is not exclusion. It is precision. The exoteric layer acts as a filter. Those satisfied with rules remain there. Those unsettled by rules begin to look deeper. The same text functions differently depending on the reader. To one, it enforces obedience. To another, it dissolves illusion. This is why the same scriptures produced both mystics and authorities. The text did not change. The mode of perception did. In Gnosis, the most dangerous mistake is literalism. Literalism collapses symbol into fact. When myth is mistaken for history, when image is mistaken for event, when metaphor is mistaken for law, the inner dimension is lost. The Gnostics warned against this repeatedly. They saw literalism as a form of blindness, not intellectual blindness but ontological blindness, a refusal to look inward. Symbols such as the fall, the demiurge, Sophia, and redemption were never meant to describe cosmic events alone. They describe states of consciousness. To read them literally is to miss their function entirely. This is why esoterism could never be mass-taught. Mass teaching requires clarity. Esoterism requires ambiguity. Ambiguity is not confusion. It is openness. It forces the mind to participate. When Gnosis went underground, it did not vanish. It survived in mysticism, in heretical movements, in symbolic art, in alchemical language, in texts misunderstood by their own guardians. The exoteric shell preserved the texts. The esoteric core preserved the meaning. Both were necessary, but only one awakens. This is the paradox of Gnosis. It survives best when ignored. It spreads without preaching. It awakens without authority. It does not demand belief. It waits for recognition. The modern confusion and the loss of depth. The modern world did not eliminate esoterism. It flattened it. What was once initiation became information. What was once transformation became content. What was once silence became noise. This is the great confusion of the present age. Exoterism now dominates not only religion, but spirituality itself. Rules were replaced by techniques. Dogma was replaced by slogans. Authority was replaced by influencers. Yet the structure remained the same. External instruction, external validation, external identity. Only the language changed. Modern spirituality often claims to be esoteric, but functions exoterically. It offers methods instead of insight, promises instead of understanding, consumption instead of confrontation. It reassures the ego rather than dissolving it. True esoterism does not comfort. It destabilizes. It removes the ground beneath false certainty. It exposes the machinery of belief. It demands inner reorientation, not affirmation. This is why it cannot be packaged. When esoterism is removed from its initiatory context, it becomes spectacle. Symbols are aestheticized. Myths are reduced to entertainment. Depth is traded for accessibility. The mystery survives in appearance but not in function. Exoterism thrives in this environment because it is predictable. It offers answers. It offers identity. It offers belonging. Esoterism offers none of these. It offers disorientation. And disorientation is unacceptable to a culture addicted to certainty. This is why the modern seeker often oscillates between belief systems. They collect ideas without integration. They consume wisdom without digestion. The inner work never stabilizes. There is motion but no transformation. The Gnostics would have recognized this pattern immediately. They warned that knowledge without gnosis becomes accumulation, and accumulation without transformation becomes illusion. In the ancient world, esoterism was protected by difficulty. Today, difficulty is avoided. Anything that cannot be immediately understood is dismissed or diluted. This is not progress. It is loss of depth. The result is a spirituality that speaks endlessly about awakening, but rarely produces it. Because awakening is not an idea. It is a reorientation of being, and reorientation requires silence, time, and inner tension. Exoterism offers relief from tension. Esoterism uses tension as fuel. One soothes, the other awakens. The modern confusion arises when people expect esoterism to behave like exoterism. They want rules for awakening, steps for gnosis, certainty about the unknown. But the unknown does not obey structure. This is why recovering gnosis today does not mean adopting ancient language or symbols. It means recovering the function of esoterism, the willingness to remain uncertain, the courage to look inward without guarantees, the patience to allow insight to mature without display. Integration, the outer and the inner path. Gnosis does not ask you to abandon the outer world. It asks you to see it clearly. The mistake has never been exoterism itself. The mistake has been stopping there. Exoterism is not false. It is partial, and what is partial becomes dangerous only when mistaken for whole. In the Gnostic understanding, the outer and the inner paths were never meant to compete. They were meant to function together. Exoterism provides structure. Esoterism provides depth. One stabilizes life, the other liberates consciousness. To live exoterically without esoterism is to live by rules you do not understand. To live esoterically without exoterism is to float without grounding. Gnosis is not imbalance. It is alignment. The awakened individual does not rebel blindly against outer forms. They see through them. They participate without identification. They follow structures without mistaking them for truth. They move within systems without being defined by them. This is inner freedom. In practical terms, this means something subtle, but radical. You may live in society, but your identity is not given by it. You may follow customs, but your meaning does not come from them. You may use language, but you are not trapped by literalism. The outer remains functional. The inner remains sovereign. This is why Gnosis was always described as remembrance, not acquisition, not conversion, not rebellion. Remembrance implies that what you seek was never absent, only covered. When esoterism awakens, exoterism transforms. Symbols regain depth. Myths open inward. Rules lose their absolute authority. They become guides, not chains. The Gnostic does not ask, "What must I believe?" They ask, "What is this symbol revealing about my state of consciousness?" This shift changes everything. Fear dissolves. Authority relocates inward. Meaning becomes experiential. This is also why Gnosis cannot be mass-produced. It cannot be enforced. It cannot be inherited. It cannot be standardized. It unfolds individually, at its own rhythm. The outer world will always exist. Institutions will always function. Rules will always be taught. Stories will always be told. Gnosis does not seek to destroy these. It seeks to penetrate them, to see the shell and recognize the core, to hear the story and understand the symbol, to follow the form while remembering the formless. This is the balance the ancients understood. When this integration occurs, something stabilizes. You no longer swing between belief and rejection, between obedience and rebellion, between faith and cynicism. You move with clarity. This is the silent mark of Gnosis. Not loud certainty, not dramatic conversion, but a quiet realignment of perception. Exoterism remains the language of the many. Esoterism remains the path of the few. Not because the few are superior, but because depth is chosen. And Gnosis is simply this. The moment you stop confusing the surface for the source and begin living from what has always been within. This is Gnostic Codex.